Andersson gets poked hard by you-know-who to check.
McDavid scores! Game winner! Series winner!
Oh, they scored! Oh, Steve Smith in a technique to get it out of his own zone, put it in the net.
Cam Talbot and Mike Smith, they're going to go at center ice. This is the Battle of Alberta we've been waiting for 3 decades!
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Fuel and Fire podcast. For those of you who don't know, our new listeners, my name is Faiz Vergi. I am a contributor to the Oil Rig. My co-host, as you all remember, is Josh. He is a contributor for the Win column. And we actually got two guests today. We got Simon and Greg, one from each of the Win column and the Oil Rig. So welcome guys. Thanks for joining on today.
Of course, happy to come on.
So the big topic recently, I think, with having 2 weeks off has been the Four Nations. I don't know about you guys. I went in not really caring and came out the most caring person of that tournament ever. I don't know how you guys felt.
Yeah, definitely a tense week or week and a half. Yes, very happy to remain sovereign. Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever felt more national pride in my entire life than watching McDavid score that goal. I will never cheer for McDavid to score again. I want to make that clear. But I jumped out of my chair when I saw that goal. That was incredible to watch.
I mean, you're going to cheer for him next year and next February.
Oh, yeah. No, whenever he's wearing a maple leaf in red, and I'm going to emphasize in red, then I will cheer for him.
Okay,
But
cheer
otherwise, I refuse to cheer for him.
Yeah, I can't help feeling, but maybe Mackenzie Weegar should have been there.
Yeah, that's the tough part.
Get me started on that one.
Yeah, I feel like I've ranted to enough people about that at this point.
Yeah, I think it's tough because they won, so it's like how much you're going to say that their team, they didn't pick the right team. They still won, which seems to be the case anytime Canada goes to one of these best on best, is everyone nitpicks players and then they end up winning anyways. But I don't think you could say Travis Sanheim or Colton Perrier were really a major part of that. I think both of them were not the best on the eye test or their actual underlying numbers. So it's hard not to picture Canada hopefully looking in a different direction next February, like whether that's Weegar, Dobson, Bouchard. Yeah, Bouchard even just in a power play specialist role, like the 2014 team that brought Subban. He barely played, but he was there as a power play specialist essentially. So maybe Bouchard is similar, but I find it hard to believe that they would take the exact same group in a year. I mean, at least I hope they don't, because Mackenzie Weegar is probably better than about 90% of the guys they took. So I'll just leave it.
I think the scariest thought, honestly, is that Binnington already earned his spot on that 2026 team to me, just off that overtime. Believe me, I thought he was incredible in that overtime. Like that cross-crease glove save, I fell out of my chair. I screamed. I thought it was over. I thought there was no way he was going to get in front of that thing. But I don't think one overtime should decide that. I am still very much on the side that Logan Thompson should have been on that team. That it's unbelievable to me that he wasn't.
I'm just saying, I'm also on the side of, look, you brought 3 goalies. You had that third game. Why didn't you play Aiden Hill in that game just to see what you have? And that's my worry, I guess, going to the Olympics. Because most Olympics, other than I think it was 98, the team played at least 2 of their goalies. And I think that's always a good idea. And I just don't understand that concept here. But, and I will disagree on Parayko, though. I don't think he should be on the team picture, but I thought he actually played a pretty good tournament, all things considered, especially once Theodore went out and he was essentially the third defenseman. But yeah, I'm in agreement with you guys that the team needs to be different, and they tried something with having who they thought were hot players this year, and maybe you need to revise that strategy next year.
Yeah, these tournaments too, for all we know, someone could come out of absolutely nowhere next season and have a ridiculous hot streak from October to January. And then someone who we haven't even considered is now making the team. So like I think going into this one, I don't think many people considered Sam Bennett as a player who would be on this team at all. Then he has that cup run last year, and then, you know, I mean, he wasn't even good to start this season, but because of that cup run, I think that pretty much got him a roster spot where I don't think anyone a year ago would have ever had Sam Bennett on Team Canada. And then he turned out to be one of their best players in the final game. So I think, again, that's a guy who I probably wouldn't have had on the team, but after what he did in the final game, I have a feeling that he's probably going to be there in the Olympics now, just based on that last performance, which, I mean, I can't fault him. He was really good, and he seems to always step up his game in crunch time. It's just, there's so many good names, and it's so hard to pick these teams that you know, Canada realistically could take like 3 teams to the tournament and they would all have a chance to win. So
we don't have 9 goalies, man.
No. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, minus the goalies.
You might be putting me in between the pipes for that third team.
Yeah, the goalies are interesting. I think, like you said, with Binnington, I saw someone tweet as we're going into the third period of that game, is he's pretty much playing for his spot on the Olympic team. If he blows up in the third period, they lose. He's arguably not even on the Olympic roster, but if he plays well, which he did, he's probably the starter for the Olympics, which, like you said, it shouldn't come down to one period, but with Hockey Canada and these type of tournaments, it usually does. Like, they bring the guys who they like, and if you perform well for them, they're going to bring you again. So again, Canada doesn't really have any goalies that are going to jump out in the next year. Like Logan Thompson obviously was much better. Like, they've got some other guys who are
right now.
Yeah, like even those guys, like you think about, there's no Carey Prices or Brodeurs or Luongos, so it's whoever's hot or whoever they trust in Binnington, for example, is probably going to be there again, because there's no really other options that they have that the guy stands out.
Yeah.
I guess he was hot, essentially.
Yeah, he's got that like winning pedigree, which is always overrated. But I mean, when it turns out like that in the last game and it shows up like that, well, then he's pretty much penciled his name as the game 1 starter in the Olympics. But I do think in a longer tournament in the Olympics, where it's like 3 group stage, then you've got quarterfinals, semifinals, finals, then you have to give other goalies a shot at least, versus this game or this tournament, 4 games. It's kind of like just ride them for all 4. But I think we will see at least someone else get a start. Maybe Stuart Skinner, but I wouldn't count on that.
If the Oilers win the cup, Skinner's on the team based on how they choose the team. You got Hill and Binnington on the basis that they won cups.
That's fair. That's fair. Honestly, I was surprised Zach Hyman wasn't there, given his season last year, and they went to Game 7, and his chemistry with McDavid. I mean, I know he had a really rough start to the year, but again, like compared to a guy like Sam Bennett, at least Hyman has a history of production, whereas Sam Bennett does not. But I mean, Sam Bennett has a cup ring, so I guess that's what Canada favors more, even if they shouldn't.
I like the physicality that Bennett brought. I thought that was something that you can't really find in other places on that Canada roster, and we saw that in both of the U.S. games. I think that's why he had such an impact, was because he kind of almost had a rare skill set for that Canada team, even though skill-wise, maybe scoring-wise, he can't keep up with half the roster. Like, it's, I think that's just kind of hard to find, and I think that is probably the one spot he does have an advantage over a lot of other people trying to make the roster.
Yeah, and my worry with him was just he can be undisciplined, right? But when he keeps it disciplined like he did, he's a perfect 12th forward, like that 4th line guy on the team like that.
Yeah, you compare it to what the Americans took in their similar roles, like 90-year-old Brock Nelson and Trocheck and like the ghost of Chris Kreider. Like, every team's going to take these like bottom grinders. I'd much rather have Sam Bennett over some of those guys, because at least Bennett is not 100 years old and he can still skate and he can still chip in, versus like, I have no idea what the Americans were doing, scratching Kyle Connor, playing Kachuk on like one leg, and then putting Chris Kreider in for the final. It was just like a huge boost to Canada to not have Connor and like one-legged Kachuk out there, versus they had Tage Thompson. They literally flew in and then they didn't play him. So
I think they could play Tage Thompson though, based on the weird rules they had.
I think if Kachuk was out, they could have put him in. Or if he was
I agree with you, Josh. I think if Kachuk officially got ruled out, they could have put him in. I think that's why they flew him in.
Yeah, who knows?
I don't think so. I mean,
you think so?
Change on the fly, but my understanding was you had your main roster, and then it was only if you were going to be short a man based off that main roster. So Connor would have played. They'd have to have played.
Oh
Connor.
yeah,
that's fair. Well, they could have just like taken Kreider back, and because they probably would have had a better chance in that case. But
Oops.
I mean, we could have said the same thing.
Wire back there. How did that happen?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it is such a weird tournament too, because like you said, with the injury rules, the NHL was, I think they realized they kind of screwed the pooch on like what they did with the injury rules as soon as Theodore went down in the first game, and then there was like the flu going around, and just this weird situation where like Thomas Harley was just sitting on the bench watching because he can't step foot on the ice, but like he's there. But then, actually now he actually can play, and Makar can also play. So it's just like, yeah, I mean, again, it's not the Olympics, so it's not as perfect as like a tournament that's been run for however many years. But I think all things considered, it was better than we expected.
Yeah, I feel like you just got to give them longer benches, basically. Like it's not cheating if everybody has 5 scratches.
Yeah,
Don't,
exactly.
don't tell that to Finland. Finland's calling up AHL defensemen, so they probably don't agree with
That's
with
true.
that, yeah.
That's true. That's fair. That's fair.
That one guy, no offense to the last guy they added when Ristolainen went down, I'd never heard his name in my life until he was added to the roster. I'm like,
You hadn't heard of a guy who played 18 NHL games?
Yeah, and then Bennington almost blew it in the third against Finland, which would have been like a national disaster. But
oh my gosh,
again, it's like so close. If they blow that game, Bennington's not on the roster in 2026. They hold on. He has a good third period in overtime. Now he's probably their starter. So it's like razor thin margins.
I will say that I am worried for the 2026 Olympics. I do not like a lot of things that we saw out of Canada. I think in a lot of cases they got saved by their offense, and that's going to be how they win in the Olympics as well. I mean, that's the strong part of the team. It's the McDavid, it's the Crosby, it's the McKinnon. That no other team can match that, and that's why we're going to win a lot of games. But I don't know. I'm just worried for that one game where we play the U.S. and Hellebuck absolutely just stands on his head. What happens then? Is Binnington going to be able to keep up? Like it's a scary thought. I think, especially if Russia's back, which I think is still up in the air as of right now.
Still up in the air.
There's a lot of questions for me right now as to what could happen in that 2026 Olympics. I think it could be scary for Canada.
Yeah, it's not like, so a lot of people mentioning it's not like the 2010 tournament where the U.S. is bringing like Brooks Orpik and Jack Johnson. Like they're pretty much on par with Canada in terms of talent now, other than those like generational guys like you mentioned. Like they don't have a McKinnon or McDavid or Crosby, but like everything other than that, they're right up to par with Canada. They have a better blue line, they have better goaltending. Yeah, exactly. Like, so I think we're so used to Canada just walking through these tournaments where I think now the States is right there where it's like pretty much a coin flip every time they play. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see with a larger field and more players there, because it's always more exciting with more countries versus just 4.
Yeah. I mean, this is like maybe more high concept, but even just thinking back to the World Juniors, like that is how this goes. The natural progression of the game growing and growing beyond itself is that more and more countries are better and better. Like Czechia has like a real gripe that it was Finland instead of them, like in this tournament. And I think like say 20, 30 years from now, it's like we're going to keep seeing new players from new places. And that is a beautiful thing. I know I still want Canada to win because I'm Canadian, but like at the end of the day, like that is the like apprentice growing beyond the master is like the most beautiful end to the arc. It's like, I think ideally that's what we want to see. It's like maybe Canada can still gut it out, but that it's so close and there's so many good countries around the world. So yeah, it's exciting for sure. It makes it more fun.
Yeah, the reason this tournament
scary.
was exciting was because other teams had clearly caught up to Canada. We took Sweden and the U.S. to overtime, right? Like, it's not like we won easily. Going into the tournament, Canada was not the favorite. I think that was very clear in even our predictions here at the win column. I think most people picked the U.S., and you should. Most people should have picked the U.S. They were very clearly the best team going into the tournament. And I think it's going to be the same case going into that Olympics. I still think the U.S. should be the favorite. I think Russia, if they are in the tournament, should be up there right with them. But I think Canada easily is probably the third best team in the tournament. That's my opinion. I think there's a good chance. Like it is a bold statement, I know, but I seriously think that both Russia and the U.S. have the chance to do some scary things in 2026.
I mean, I think it just comes down to goaltending, and that's the only reason why people are so negative on Canada, and rightfully so, mind you. But I think if we have, even a mid-level goaltender who you can trust, it doesn't need to be a Price or Luongo. It could be, I guess Joseph was also really good, but like, it doesn't have to be someone to that level. It doesn't have to be to Hellebuck. If you have a Swayman level goalie,
that might be even a big ask, though.
Yeah, Blackwood, the Church of Blackwood would request the floor here. Yeah.
If Blackwood plays that way, I think everyone's writing off Canada because of the negativity there. And we talk about the depth. I mean, our forward depth is still good. Yeah, should Seth Jarvis and Travis Konechny be there? Are those names that you compare with the Americans? Maybe they're not, but they're also still good players, and that's a decision-making thing. We talk about Hyman not being there. I think people sleep on Canada, and even on the defense, you've got Cale Makar, and then you've got Shea Theodore. Like, if Theodore's not down, I think our defense looks 1,000 times better. And we've got the depth there as well. I think it's just the goaltending that everyone's pessimistic about.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny because, like, Canada's won 5 of the last 6 best-on-best tournaments dating back to 2002. They just won again, and they've lost, like, 5 games in, like, 20 years, and we're all sitting here talking about how screwed they are and, like, how...
I still think that this is the worst team we've seen, though, other than 2006. That's the exception. Everybody knows that's the exception. That never happened. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm really impressed by what we saw out of the U.S. I think if they actually play up to what their roster is, they could beat us. They could absolutely beat us. They have the offensive talent.
I think you can.
We saw that in the first game.
I don't think you can let Matthew Tkachuk and Brady Tkachuk run, like, you're letting the inmates run the asylum there by being like, letting them be the emotional leaders, but like actually being like, all right, let's play around. Like, let's make this a sideshow tournament. Like, they don't have the leadership to rein in those guys to be like, this is a tournament that, we need your physicality. We need you guys to do that. That's the sideshow is not the show. And I think, we go back to Bennett and even Binnington as guys who are hotheads. I think you got Crosby in the room, McDavid, McKinnon, Makar, who are just like, sit down, play your game hard, but this isn't about you. And I think the Tkachuks and JT Miller and all those guys and all these Americans were very much, this is about me personally versus about the tournament winning. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah,
based on how they played.
I 100% agree. I think you can say that American locker room was probably the most toxic locker room of any sport ever assembled. I'm not going to get into it more, but like you said, I think there's a lot of characters on that roster versus Canada. Like you said, like the Crosbys, even like Marchand, like a guy, he's not as good as he was. I think he's a perfect guy in the room. Like, he's been there. He knows how to win. He knows how to lead. And like the amount of captains on Team Canada, the amount of cup wins they've had, like, it was like night and day compared to the States. I think that's a big difference versus like the Tkachuks of the world, the JT Millers. Like, these just like pea-head bozos who are just like running their mouths and playing for certain reasons that I'm not going to get into. But I think part of it was because it's the 4 nations. If it was the Olympics, they probably would have reined it in a little bit more because it wasn't as big of a, NHL spectacle kind of thing. But I think you're 100% on par there. I think at the end of the day, that leadership that Canada has versus the States where, the Tkachuks are like kind of leading the way, and it kind of takes this little sideshow versus I don't think you're ever going to see that with Canada as long as you got guys like Crosby, McDavid, McKinnon in the room. Like, McKinnon's probably slapping any carbs out of anyone's hand on that team. Like, they better be eating chickpea pasta. Like, they're absolutely locked in. And then you've got like the Tkachuks over there just running around. So I think that played a pretty big factor too.
Yeah. So I guess, now that that's done though, we've got to go back to the regular season. Definitely watching the Oilers yesterday morning, I should say. It's a slower pace for sure. And that was a rough game. They looked terrible, but we're 2 weeks out now from the trade deadline, and we're getting to that stretch run here. So, I know for the Oilers, we're buyers. It's without question, and we've got certain areas that we need to shore up. But I mean, for the Flames, you guys are 3 points out of the playoffs right now.
Something like that. It's close.
What do you do if you're Craig Conroy? What are you doing here on March 7th?
That's a big question. Josh, you want to go first?
I think it still depends on what happens the next couple of weeks, to be honest. Like it feels like this team has just kind of been in like a waiting state pretty much until after the Four Nations break, like that couple of weeks before the deadline, where they've just kind of stuck around in the 8th, 9th spot, where you're still kind of waiting to see if they fall off, then you sell. If they start winning, do you buy? And I think it's still too early to tell. I mean, then again, we could just be in this exact same spot 2 weeks from now, sitting right on the bubble. They're kind of 500, right? And then I think you just kind of have to go with what you have. I don't think it makes sense to start buying unless you're like locked into a spot, maybe like they go on a big streak here. But given what we've seen of this team, they've started to slip a bit already. Like we said, they're 3 points back now of Vancouver, and it's pretty dicey. Like I don't think they're in a spot where you should be going out to add players, because at the end of the day, adding like a rental at the deadline is not going to be the difference for this team of winning a round or not. I think if you make it, just kind of go with it. You're in like a retooling, rebuilding year. I think of like the 14-15 year where they still kind of just stood pat, sold if they could, and to just see where their current roster gets them. That's the best you can do. But, going out and paying assets to buy players, I don't think makes sense for where they are. They've already traded a second in the Frost Farabee deal. So I think that should probably be it for now, unless a Marco Rossi becomes available or like someone like that,
Right.
Then it makes sense. But if we're talking like a 30-year-old rental center, then Conroy should have his BlackBerry taken away or whatever he uses.
I totally agree with you too. I think if you are going to buy, it needs to be someone young and someone who's going to be on the team for the next while. I don't think you can bring in a rental, even if the team is winning. I just don't think it makes sense. Because I think even if the Flames go on a stretch here, I don't think anybody's going to be going, oh, we're winning the cup. I don't think that's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks. I'd be very surprised. I think I actually really like the move to bring in Frost and Farabee. I think if you want to make another move like that to try and bring in more young guys who can maybe play in that middle six area, I would not be against that. I think it does depend on what you're giving up, but it's almost more of just a lateral move than anything else. I don't know if it's more buying or selling, because you're still bringing in guys for the future while improving the team now. But I don't know. I think that probably makes the most sense. It seemed like that's probably what Conroy is going to look at the most. Although I guess it depends. If we do somehow go on a crazy streak, maybe that changes, like you said, Josh. So who knows?
Yeah. I think like that Farabee Frost one you mentioned, like that was a pretty good example where the Flames didn't really give up much. Like we all love Jacob Pelche, but at the end of the day, he cleared waivers like 4 months ago. He's at best probably going to be a third line guy, which still is even up for debate if he even is that. And then Kuzmenko, we heard that he was very close to being put on waivers too by the Flames. So like there's two guys who didn't have negative value, but didn't exactly have a whole lot of value. And you've got back two players who have, been 40, 50 point guys who can be producers. They're still in their mid 20s. You gave up a second, which hurts a little bit, but considering what you're getting back, I think that's kind of the perfect type of trade if you're kind of looking to add, but not give up too much. It doesn't fix anything. It's kind of like putting duct tape on a sinking ship, I think, which it'll maybe keep you afloat for a little longer. It's not going to make you a contender though. There's much larger issues, but on paper,
like they have contracts, right? Like you still got control of them. They're not anywhere close to a rental.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah.
And the chances you get something with that second better than Frost and Farabee are slim, very slim. So I think more than anything, I'm more than happy to give up a second for him.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, on paper, you look at that trade on paper and what's swapping. It's like, I think that's night and day, a massive win for the Flames. Like Pelche and Kuzmenko really don't have a lot of value. Kuzmenko probably won't be in the league within a couple months. Like he's probably going to go back to the KHL. And then Pelche is just a very much unknown like tweener. So to get back Farabee, who had 50-something points last year, Frost had 40+ and he plays center. Like I think that's a win all day. So I think it's a good deal for Conroy, and I think more trades like that would be beneficial.
One thing I'm curious about for your guys' opinion is like sometimes when you're on this tweener thing and you're not sure if you're retooling, rebuilding, like do you maybe trade like a 3rd, 4th, 5th round pick for like a little bit of a depth piece or a more veteran piece? Like is that something that you do because it's not the highest price, but maybe it can help, or do you just let it ride essentially?
I don't know. I wouldn't be mad if Conroy did it, honestly, because like you said, it's not a crazy price, right? If that happened, I think I'd look at it and go, okay, I get it. We're trying to make a bit of a run here. I understand it. But if it were me, I think I probably wouldn't. I don't know if it'd really be worth it. I think I'd rather just keep the third.
Yeah, exactly. I'm totally on the same page. Like, it's not a big deal if you're trading a fifth or a fourth. It's like that's a lottery ticket essentially, but still, I don't think it's worth it. Like, reminds me of the trade they made a couple of years ago for like Ryan Carpenter at the deadline, where it's like he's like a fourth line center. He adds your depth, but like he's not going to be the difference if you win a playoff round or not. So it's at the end of the day, keep the pick and then hope you hit on that pick, or you can use it to trade up at the draft or something. Like, I think you've got enough middle six players on this team already that you've kind of got a clogged lineup to begin with. So unless you're adding top line guys, like I don't think there's much point of adding more, just because you've got so many like second, third, fourth line guys. That's pretty much their whole roster. I think you could say they don't have a single first line player, but that's a whole nother topic. But
it's not necessarily false.
So I should say a first line forward. That's a fourth line forward, because they do have Mackenzie Weegar and Rasmus Andersson. But at forward, there's a reason they're like bottom 5 in the NHL in scoring. So I think you can try to just committee your way into the playoffs and just ride it out, see what happens. But there's no point of trying to add, because when it comes down to it, is adding a fourth line center going to be the difference when you're playing the Oilers and McDavid and Draisaitl and those guys? Like, no, they're going to run you
If
over.
you're going to win, it's going to be off defense and goaltending. That's been the key this year for the Flames. More goaltending than defense. But exactly. I do think that I agree with you. I don't think adding a fourth line center or whatever it would end up being is going to help you with the scoring side of things. I don't think adding a defender would help with that either, just to be clear. But I don't know. I think more than anything else, it probably wouldn't be worth it. I think I'd rather get a prospect with that third.
Well, I think like Conroy, it seems like he's doing really well. The last couple of drafts he's done have been amazing. Like even those later picks, I know it's like a precarious situation for Flames fans to be like kind of in the middle. Which way can we go? There's all the contracts last year. It's like he's taking a lot of reasonable bets, like betting on younger players like Frost, Farabee, but also like Kevin Ball, like, and maybe Sharangovich. Maybe they don't all work out, but it's a very like, I think I've been impressed by the work that he's done, and I think he deserves some faith, maybe even from the most like ardent proponents of Team Tank. Is like, hey, he's doing all right. I think like seems like it at least.
I was just gonna say that I liked the Sharangovich trade, or the contract when it happened. Like when they gave Sharangovich that deal at the beginning, I was a fan of it.
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned with Conroy, he is doing well. I think the Andersson situation is definitely going to be a really big moment in the next year. That is a huge, huge decision. Like, are you going to trade him for what should be a haul? Like, even though he's had a bit of a rough year, he's still that age range, that, top pairing defenseman when he's at his best, who a lot of teams are going to want. You could get a haul for him. Are you going to extend him for 8 years? Like, which pretty much signals that you're fully committed to winning. And I think that's a huge decision. That's going to be Conroy's number one task in the next 12 months. That's really going to determine what direction this team goes. I think I don't anticipate anything happening in the next few months. I think they've kind of already said they're not trading him. They're going to try to sign him. But I mean, they said the same thing about Lindholm. They said the same thing about Hanifin. They said the same thing about all the other guys who left. So it's really up to Andersson at the end of the day. And if he doesn't want to stay, then you've got to find the best return you can and not run into another Hanifin situation where it's right down to the neck of it. You're still trying to sign him, and then you end up trading him for, pennies, essentially. Like that 2026 first is nice, but Miramanov just has not been it. So I don't think you want to be in March 2026 looking to move Andersson at the last minute. You got to kind of make up your mind long before then.
I mean, we can offer you guys like a gently used Drake Caggiula and Lane Peterson for him for sure. So, keep
How
that
kind of you.
consideration.
Don't say that too loud. Connor might take you up on that offer. So,
because I mean, like, can we make trades? I know that's there's been some pretty good fits in the past, like last year with Tanev. Like, man, if the Oilers got Tanev, I think we'd win the cup. And it's like, no, can't do that. But if we could actually put together a package, like, how do you guys feel? Andersson puts us over the top, I think, almost. So,
I wouldn't want to give you guys Andersson. He's
No.
too good.
but I think it was an actual good return. I can't really think of a good return on my head in terms of prospects that you guys would want. Like, I guess Savoy would maybe be the biggest return there, but
If there's a good return, I would do it because I don't think Anderson's the guy. He's not like a superstar guy who's going to haunt you for years and years. Like, he's a very good player, but it's not like you're trading a superstar. But I think, it would take the Oilers probably have to overpay versus other teams to get him. And I don't know if the Oilers have the prospects that I think the Flames would want or the first round picks that are going to be in the 20s. Like, so I think it makes a lot of sense if the value is right. Like, I would still do it, but I just don't know if what the Oilers have would meet what the Flames want. And I think the Flames would probably add a 20% tax to whatever any other team offered. So that's a tough one.
like, I think we've made like 2 or 3 trades in our history or something, and they've been kind of nothing burgers, but still, Oilers have traded 2 heart and soul defensemen to the Flames, and I don't know how I feel about that. So maybe it's time you send a heart and soul defenseman our way. I'm just saying.
Finally pay back for Ladislav
Smid and Steve Stales.
Yeah.
It's a couple of Flames.
I think if I
right
saw Andersson stare down somebody in the Saddle Dome, I would cry. I think that would be a very sad moment. A part of me would die that day. So I don't know if I'd want him on the Oilers, to be honest with you. But I mean, if they are willing to overpay completely for him, then maybe. But I can't imagine Craig Conroy doing it. I'd have a hard time imagining him sitting down in that chair and making that deal.
Which I don't know, man. I don't necessarily agree with that from a business decision. I mean, I don't think the Oilers have what it takes to get Andersson, like, in terms of putting together a package. But I'm like, I don't know. I think, Tanev last year, the rumor was we offered a better package to the Flames than Dallas did. And Conroy was like, no, I can't trade him to the Oilers. And I think that's just bad. I think that's bad management. I don't agree with it. So, like, I mean, even with the Oilers, like, we traded Smid, we got Brissois back. He didn't end up panning out for us, but like, that was a good trade. And I think, the fans, us, we can all be like, no, we can't ever do that. But I think, you talk about the good things Conroy does, but if you're letting that kind of emotion get in, it's not great, especially when you've made 2 trades with Vancouver since then. Like,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, my argument against that was just going to be, I mean, you don't want to trade good players in division. That's kind of the rule. But I mean, like you just said, Vancouver, that's the big thing that kind of disproves that. So yeah, no, fair enough. That's fair. I think more for me, I just look at it as like, I wouldn't want to play Tanev as much as we have to play you guys. That would suck. Tanev's hard to play against. He's a terrific defender. So is Andersson. So I think I just look at it like that. But then again, we've already seen Conroy kind of disprove that with Vancouver. So
yeah, I think if the value's there, like we said, if it's like, again, if it's like Eichel, when Buffalo's trading him, they're not trading him in their division. He's a superstar. Like, when players like that caliber are available, you don't want to be haunted by them for years. But like, I don't think Andersson is in that tier. Like, he's a very, very good player, but I think you're kind of screwing yourself if you're limiting the options of where you're going to move him just based on your rivals. Because again, he's not Jack Eichel. He's not like a player who's going to be a top 10 player for the next 10 years. He's just going to haunt you. I think if the value's there, you got to do it. And yeah, like we said, exactly like the Lindholm trade, like, good player, but he's not a superstar, and he's been terrible in Boston now, but that's another discussion. But I think you're fine moving him to Vancouver. Like, Elias Lindholm's not going to haunt you. If anything, he's going to help you win because he's kind of terrible. But
I mean, going back to the packaging though, like, for the Oilers, there's some stuff we need to improve on, and I don't know if we have necessarily the assets to do it well enough. Because I mean, Savoy, he's played 1 game, but it was a great game, and you already lost Holloway. I don't think you can give up on Savoy.
Yeah, and then they have no first round pick this year, right? Already they traded it to get Sam O'Reilly, Bo Akey. So there's some okay pieces that are worth something, but hey, you're not making like the league's biggest blockbuster. And if you're trading a first from this year to pick O'Reilly last year, it's like, hey, we know that like instead of this liquid capital that's going to help us improve the team, it's like we love this player and we see him as part of, you know, a good complement to the players that we already have. So it'd be hard for me to imagine them, especially new scouting director for amateur scouting, like his first pick, they trade up into the first round. Or like, it would be crazy if they traded Sam O'Reilly, in my opinion. But like, hey,
I mean, I don't think it's happening. I think, and I frankly, I don't know if I'd want to trade Sam O'Reilly. I do think, you know, when you do need to look a little bit in the future still for the Oilers with the new contracts. Granted, the cap.
I mean, I think maybe the biggest conversation is like, are you going to target that right D upgrade, or are you going to go for the goalie? Obviously, we can't get Dustin Wolf, but that would be nice. But yeah,
in your dreams, buddy.
But that's the big debate, I guess, is which one is really going to help the Oilers more, you know?
I'm curious. So I was going to say, from an Oilers fan perspective, like there's been rumors that apparently Rantanen, one, the Oilers are interested, and two, the Hurricanes might flip him now for a more retained, so he's like 2.5 against the cap. Yeah. To me, that seems like an absolutely perfect scenario for the Oilers to step in, get a superstar like that as a rental, like at 2.5 million. He won't cost anywhere as much as what Carolina paid for him. And I think that could be a perfect scenario for the Oilers. I don't know, from your perspective, if they could somehow swing that, like that seems like a perfect deal.
Yeah. Like, I mean, in that case, especially if you have the chance to talk to him, you know, there was I think it was kind of a fake rumor maybe that Rantanen wanted to sign with the Oilers as a free agent, but with the cap going up, if you could somehow know that you're going to be able to squeeze him in, then yeah, you easily trade Savoy for him, obviously. You know, you trade all the first, whatever, but you get Rantanen, you know, you've got that extra goal scoring. That's just another guy who can, you know what, if you wanted to, you could probably run McDavid, Draisaitl, Rantanen on 3 separate lines. And that is a depth that, like, is uncomparable in the league.
Yeah, so, I think.
Yeah. And we can fit him in at 2.3. We can easily fit
exactly.
him in.
Like, when is a player like Rantanen going to be available at the deadline for under $3 million? Like, it's such a rare case. And I think if I'm the Oilers, like, yeah, like for me, even if you know 100% Rantanen says, I'm not signing with you if you acquire me, like, I'd still do it, because I think you only have so many years of McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard in their primes. Like, just go for it. Like, at the end of the day, I'd rather see a playoff run with Rantanen and McDavid versus a first-round pick that might play in 4 years. So I think as much as it would suck as a Flames fan to watch Rantanen playing with McDavid and Draisaitl, I think I don't know, I just have a feeling that something like that's going to happen at the deadline. It just makes too much sense from perspective for the Oilers.
If you only have so many, if there's that availability there, I'd rather do that than, you know, try and get an upgrade on Skinner, when realistically the only upgrade out there is Gibson, who just got hurt, you don't actually know how good he's going to be in the future. He's got a big contract. Skinner's making $2.3 million. And like every team that's won the cup more recently has had a Skinner level goalie. I know we don't trust him as much, but we also know that he can play well. We just need him to get hot. And if you've got the offense again to outscore him, I just don't see, other than Gibson, there being a clear upgrade. And I don't know if that's then you focus on it.
No, yeah, I think goalies, I mean, going back to the Four Nations, like Binnington has been terrible this season. He was pretty bad for most of the tournament, and then in the most important moments, he was great, and he got them to win. So, like, that's really all you need from Skinner, too. He's got such a loaded team in front of him. You just need a guy who can get hot at the right moments, and we know he can. We know he can be a good goalie. So it's probably not worth investing in an upgrade for a marginal upgrade when you know he can be the guy you need to be in the big moment. It's just about him actually doing that. But it's when you have a team like that, you just need a couple stops in the big moments and you can win. So
I would say the bigger need, frankly, is that top 4 right D. You know, Klingberg is good, and I think he's a good depth piece for sure. And, you know, when you go into the playoffs, how is Andersson going to fare, and also injury wise? But I think that's more important than a goalie, and even just for dealing with that goals against issue. Like if we can get Carson Soucy, that would be huge.
I was just gonna say it kind of sucks just talking about the Oilers and who they could add for their playoff runs and stuff, because it's We haven't had that in Calgary in a couple of years now. It feels like forever. So and I don't want the Flames to do that this year, but man, it definitely sucks like having a team that's all in and is going to go on a deep playoff run. And I hope the Flames can get back there soon. But it's just as a Flames fan, picturing Rantanen with the Oilers, I can't say that doesn't. It would be pretty cool to see, just to see that level of talent together. I hope they lose, but it would be cool to see for at least a couple rounds.
I can say as a hockey fan, that power play would be incredible. That would be incredible to watch. Your guys' power play in the playoffs last year was already bonkers. I can't even imagine it with Rantanen. That would be incredible.
The interesting thing there is, I mean, one of the reasons why the Oilers power play works so well is because everyone's got a role. And does Rantanen doesn't place Hyman. Hyman's your front net presence. Does Rantanen replace Nugent Hopkins? Like, obviously as a better player, yes, but you watch how the power play runs, and Nuge is like the quiet distributor who everyone's focusing on the big three, and they hand him the puck, and that he can get it anywhere, and he can be a sneaky option. Is Rantanen? I mean, he's got the right-handed shot, mind you. Does that happen, or do you play Rantanen on, like, you can swap him in maybe, I guess, but I don't know.
Even just power play depth you could talk about. That second power play line would be pretty good too. Like I think just adding to your offense, it doesn't hurt. I think bringing in a guy like Rantanen would not hurt. Like the fact that it's a choice between Nugent Hopkins and Rantanen on that power play just shows how much offensive talent is oozing out of the Oilers right now.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's crazy that would even be a conversation, frankly. Your guys, if you survive that first power play line and then you see Rantanen hop off the bench, I'd be pulling the goalie. I like, just get him out of there.
Waving the white flag, just Roger.
It's over.
Yeah, the Flames are over here like, who do we put on the second power play? Daniil Miramanov or maybe we go Farabee, Yeah, so it's like, I will say though, with, like you said, to kind of Rantanen's fit on the power play, I think that's a good point, because you look at Carolina, I know it's still really early, but everyone, when that trade went down, home run for Carolina, easy win. And he just hasn't fit in with their system, with their team so far yet. And again, it's super early, but it is like kind of a red flag of like, even if a guy's super talented joining other super talented players, it still takes them some time, or it may just not be a fit ever. Like, he was a perfect fit alongside McKinnon in Colorado in their system, but so far he hasn't been a perfect fit in Carolina. So sometimes, as talented as a player is, he just doesn't fit in with a certain team or a certain system. I mean, I don't think that would be an issue with the Oilers, because I think they have so much elite talent that you could find somewhere for him. But yeah, it is like you said, it can kind of throw off chemistry sometimes. It can be, a disruptor if you had a player of that talent and magnitude, and then he doesn't really fit in.
Well, and I think we saw that in the Four Nations even a little bit with Sam Reinhart, both playing with McDavid. It sounds like it's a pretty decent pairing, or even Mitch Marner, other than, that the game-winning goal. But, they didn't, their styles don't mesh. And I think even back to the power play point, I think Sam Reinhart should not have been on that first power play unit, because he didn't add what those other four players needed. Like, Bennett would have been better, frankly. Hyman would have been great.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's not like the All-Star game. You do still have to find players that can mesh together. And it's the same thing, like, for years on Team Canada, like with Crosby, they've struggled to find who plays with Crosby. Like, he's the best player in the world. And then it turned out to be, Patrice Bergeron moving to the wing was a great fit for a couple tournaments, or it's, Mark Stone or like Brad Marchand. It's not the players you expect sometimes that gel the best. Sometimes it's a different type of player that fits best, again, with those like generational talents like McDavid. Like, you gotta, watching the Four Nations when they had Stone with McDavid, like, the guy was like 20 strides behind him the entire time. It's like, he's a good player, Stone, but he's so different from McDavid that it's like, I think you might want to have a little more foot speed, a guy like Hyman or something who can kind of keep up and dig pucks out, because sometimes, as good as players are, they just don't gel when it's, very, very different styles.
That being said, get Rantanen. I'm willing to take that risk.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah.
I still don't get what Carolina is doing, thinking of trading him. So I don't.
I think it's very them realizing he maybe isn't going to re-sign there with how things are going, and they're like, we need to recoup something.
Isn't that the point?
Nothing.
I really wonder what the Oilers would have to give up for him. Because I don't even know if I have an example in my head of what that type of
Well, like,
deal
that's my
would look
thing.
like.
Sure,
Would they take like a Vander Kane and Jeff Skinner because they're also trying to win now? Maybe they could re-sign those guys. Like, I don't know. What do they want for Rantanen? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very rough spot for Carolina, because if they do end up having to shopping him, like, everyone knows they're backed into a corner. They give up an absolute haul in Neckis for him, so like they want to get something back, but also like they don't want to lose him for nothing. So they're kind of backed into a corner if it gets to the point where he's not gelling and they have a couple of weeks to move him. So yeah, I think the Oilers could probably get him for an absolute bargain, like, not just his cap hit because of the retention, but what they would give up, because I think Carolina has kind of potentially screwed themselves if he doesn't fit in, because everyone's going to know that they're going to want to move him because he doesn't want to sign there. So that's, I think, where a team like the Oilers could step in and get him for an absolute steal.
I mean, I think for the Oilers, it's going to have, for like, all we can offer is a future trade, a futures trade. I mean, maybe we send over 2 first-round picks, or Savoy or Akey or O'Reilly for that kind of thing. But like, otherwise, you look at our depth or our options. You know, Berezkin is potentially really good. Vinny could be really good, but none of them are studs. And so is Carolina. I mean, maybe they're between a rock and a hard place, but you got to think someone else can give up a better package than the Oilers could.
Yeah. And you also wonder why Carolina that essentially would want to move them. They're kind of in that win now too. So it's like, yeah, like you said, Greg, like maybe they just keep them because like they've tried so many years now to get over that hump and they can never get past the conference finals. So they're very similar to the Oilers, where it's like, just go for it. Like, you may lose them for nothing, but at the end of the day, you're in a win now mode with like Aho and Svechnikov and those guys. Like, just go for it, see what happens. If you don't get in, then at least you tried. Like, the worst thing is, and this is like a Brad Treliving special, is like looking back on years past where it's like, man, if only we made that deal for Stone, if only we made that deal for Eichel, if only we made that deal for etc. Maybe we could have done something that season. Where it's like, we're in the time, it's like, oh, well, we want to save our picks, or we don't want to lose this guy for nothing. So we're not going to do this. And then now I think every single person in the world would trade Valimaki for Mark Stone in 2019, and the Flames maybe win a cup that year. So it's like, at the end of the day, just go for it when you have a chance, because winning seasons don't come around often. So if you've got the team that you think can do it, just keep them together and then deal with it after. Like, if you're a contender, you may as well go on a run and try, instead of just over analyzing your assets.
Yeah, flags fly forever after all.
Yeah, exactly. Like, at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, the Flames are a perfect example of that. Just in the Treliving era, just constantly like being right there. Oh, we almost had Eichel, we almost had Stone, we almost had Ben Bishop. All this, like, if Treliving actually pulled the trigger and put down his Boston pizza pasta that he was eating and like actually made the call and got the deal done, maybe they would have had a conference finals appearance since 2004. But at the end of the day, he didn't, and now it's kind of just a whole whack of like what ifs. Like, what if he did this move? So I think the Oilers are a perfect scenario where you have probably the most talented player in the history of the sport on your team. Like, just do whatever you can to win.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I forgot about Zach Hyman, Connor McDavid.
I mean, I think about Draisaitl there. You know, the guy who's MVP this year. Yeah, Zach Hyman.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah, no, it's I definitely envy the Oilers and the talent they have, because the Flames don't have that. They have Zane Parekh and then Dustin Wolf, and then it's like, those two guys are incredible, but they can't carry the rest of the team. So we need some more help. So I envy the situation the Oilers are in. I think they would be not smart to not just go all in when they can, and just, because I feel like that's been what I've seen around about the Oilers, is kind of a lot of criticisms around their management of maybe not pushing all their chips in enough and kind of being a little too cautious. I don't know if that's how you guys think too, but to me, it seems like they should just be doing whatever they can. And then, at the end of the day, you look like a team like Pittsburgh. That's what they did. They won 3 cups, and now they're terrible, and they're going to be terrible for a decade, but they won 3 cups. So that's all that matters.
Yeah, that's the interesting question of like, how much to go all in, or have the Oilers gone in? Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm a bit of an outsider with this take, but it's if you look at like when Ken Holland started to what the team was at the end, I mean, he's spent all of his cap space, and everyone hated his moves. And there were some unpopular goalies that he had held on to, but it's like maybe not the moves everyone wanted, but like he was always very aggressive. And he took the team from, oh my goodness, like McDavid is staring into the abyss. He's moving back to Newmarket. Yeah. And into like they're a perennial contender. Like we're not like, oh, hopefully Tyson Barrie gets them into the playoffs. It's like, no, they're legit, like stacked, one of the best teams, like top tier contender. So that transformation, and it wasn't pretty. Like there was lots of years, and even still, like Skinner gets no credit, Picard gets no credit, Andersson gets no credit. But it's like, hey, they took their chances. They spent up to the cap. They did some crazy things, like signing some questionable players that maybe like most teams wouldn't be signing. So yeah, they were super aggressive. It was not always popular, but they definitely have been risking it for the biscuit, for sure.
I think people give Holland a lot of guff that I don't think was fully deserved. And, going back to putting all the chips in, McDavid and Draisaitl are what, 25, 26 at those times. And it's not even actually. And it's like, oh, let's throw all of our chips, all of our prospects in there. Well, okay, you win one cup, and then at the end of their contracts, you've got no depth surrounding them, and they're gonna peace out. Like, I think a lot of people were not keeping that consideration. Like, they weren't keeping that in consideration, that when you have guys who are still younger, like you can't be that aggressive in terms of losing everything. I think now they're getting to the point where you've got Draisaitl signed, and you've got a decent amount of players signed that are your core anyway going forward. So I think now you can be even more risky for sure. But I think a lot of people have unrealistic expectations on how to build a team and how much of a superstar team you can build. Other than getting Mikko Rantanen this year.
Yeah, I don't want to say the NHL's rigged, but I mean, is it a coincidence that the cap is taking a gigantic leak the same time that the Oilers have to sign McDavid and Bouchard? I don't know, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, rigged for the Oilers, definitely.
It's the win. It's the Edmonton Oilers, that big market. Imagine, weren't they like the highest earners or whatever last year or something? Revenue.
I will say it is funny, like the discussion, just because like how close the Oilers were to winning a cup. Like you guys know obviously, but like one bounce goes a different way, and we're not even talking about any of this. And it's like, oh, all this worked. They were great. Like everything worked perfectly, but like it shows how thin the margins are. Whereas like you lose one game, and now the discussions are completely different of what they could have been like a few months ago. And now it's like, yeah, so it's pretty crazy. It's going same thing with the Four Nations. Like if Martyr doesn't score that OT winner versus Sweden wins, Canada's not even in the final, and we're like having a summit on Canadian hockey versus now it's like all roses because they won. So it's just a crazy sport.
Also talking about MVP Draisaitl, he just scored against Washington.
That'll be a close to episode 5 of the Fuel and Fire podcast. The Oilers are on, so we all want to hop off, watch them lose. So make sure you like, subscribe, follow on your platform of choice for podcasts, and we'll see you in the next one.